Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the BEST part number CD431-2. This is BEST's standard combinating kit, or what we would call a pin kit, right? This is going to contain everything that you need to combinate their interchangeable cores in their A2 system. So first, a definition of their systems. BEST has just a general cursory overview. They have an A2, an A3, and an A4. Those three systems, they use the same cores, they use the same pins, they use all the same tools and all the accessories, all the same keyways. The physical hardware doesn't change. What the difference is as follows. The A2 system versus A3 and A4 have a specific pin stack height. In an A2 system, that pin stack height is 23. 23 is just a number. 23 is a number. A3 is a 16 pin stack height. A4 is a 14 pin stack height. Frank Best, from what I've read, who invented the small format core, used 23 for A2, 16 for A3, 14 for A4, just to make it simple. Because as you know, pins, they have an actual size to them, a physical size. Well, rather than saying the A2 system has a pin stack of 0.972 or 9875 inch, and that's a made-up number, he associated the actual pins with just a regular number, a number 5 pin. Bottom pin, a number 12 driver. Okay, so 5 and 12 and then other numbers. You have to come up to 23. At least that is the rule that governs the system. Whether or not you had 22 or 24 in a pin stack may not ultimately affect how the core works, but it's not correct. Anyway, so the pin kit is dependent on the system, A2, A3, or A4. A2, I understand, is the original system. It would have permitted, because it's a two-step system where there is odd or even parity, if there are 10, just a quick overview, if there are 10 possible depths in the A2 system, which there are, and let's assume that you're going to master key the cylinder, you're going to have available to you 4 possible other pins in your key bitting array. Yeah, okay, I'm good. So an A2 system is a 10-step system that, because the pin increment is, I believe it's 0.125 inch, is so close, you would use pins that were at least two steps or more away from each other. So if you had a master key that was, I'm just going to write out just a made-up master key here. And it's going to be a 6-pin system, let's say, just 6-pin. It can be 7-pin. If that's my master key, my key bitting array is going to be made up of those numbers other than these numbers. So my key bitting array, and I'll write it out real quick. I'm going to pause the video and then write it out. Written out a key bitting array, or a KBA, and not to get too deep in the woods on what that means, but if this is my master key and I have a 10-step system, and I have to be in parity, either odd or even parity, and that's a fancy way of saying I have to be every 2 numbers. My key bitting array, my other possible pins that I can use would be 5, 7, 9, and 1. Okay? Because I've got a 3 in the master. I can't use, in total position progression, I'm not going to use the, and although it's done, I'm not going to use any of the bittings that are in the master key at all. And that is done so as to prevent the possibility of contamination of the bitting list or unintentional cross-keying. So I'm not going to use any of the master key numbers. That's why they don't exist in the key bitting array. Now, this is in parity. This happens to be odd parity, and that's just because this is an odd number. But the point is, I'm going every two. I'm going in increments of 2 because it has to be in parity. I have to be every 2 steps because that pin difference is about 0.125 inch. That's too thin of a wafer to use. That's why you have to go to every 2. Now, the A2 system will give you, in a 6-pin system, 4,096 changes in a 6-pin system. A 7-pin system, and I'm going to show you how I get that number, is 16,384 changes. There is no maximum adjacent cut specification rule for small format, so for best. You don't have to worry about this 1 and 8 being together. You don't have to worry about, well, I don't really see anything that's difficult. But you don't have to worry about it. You could have a 0 and a 9 together is the bottom line. So in a 6-pin system, I'm going to have this many possible changes. In a 7-pin system, I'll have this many possible changes. In each key bitting array, how many numbers are in the array per column? Well, there's 5, including the master, but we're not using that, so there's 4. This is a 6-pin cylinder. So the possible changes, the 4096 is 4 to the 6th power. Otherwise, in other words, 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. 4 to the 6th power is 4,096. 4 to the 7th power, if I added another 7th chamber here, I'll be at that 16,384 number. So while that's a lot of changes, that's really not a lot of changes. Because while BEST can do their milled key blanks, multiplex type of system, that's not what they do per se. The A3 system was born out of the fact, the A3 and the A4. The A3 was born out of the fact that they wanted to be able to significantly increase the amount of possible changes. Now, before I go into the A3 system, 2 things. There is, below this video, a link to the manufacturer's page. You can click on that. Then on that page, there are several documents. There's one that's called the A2 and A4 Key System Training. A2 and A4 Keys System Training. An irreplaceable document. There is also the service manual that's there. Quick reference guide to combinating best cores. Those documents are the everything you need to know to go from knowing nothing about pinning best small format to being able to do it very competently. Locksmithing is like most things where it's actually self-taught. You might have a teacher who teaches you, but at the end you're driving your own instruction, and it's the same with this. But be cautious. If you like locksmithing, you're going to fall in love with learning more about the BEST system, because it was in 1921 that Frank Best basically invented the small format system that is the footprint of who knows how many hundreds of millions of installations today. So now, we talked about the A2 system. It gave us some changes. Well, that's nice. Well, if you're a Big Ten university, it's not nearly enough keys. So the A3 system was born out of the need for a lot more changes. Okay, let's take a look at that. Now, to back up for a minute, these total changes is given the fact that you're working in a master keyed environment, which you would be. But if you were to use, those values in the key bitting array as well, that's how those numbers are derived. 4 to the 6th power or 4 to the 7th power. 6-pin chamber or 7-pin. And that number is just literally how many possible available numbers are there, how many chambers are there. There are 4 possibles and there are 6 chambers. That's simply how it's that it's derived. Not a lot of not a lot of possible changes, as I said earlier. It's really not. If you've been on a Big Ten university, you still might not even, visualize how epically massive their installations are of doors. Buildings will have hundreds of doors in a single building, and they will have dozens of buildings on a campus. Now, the A3 system was derived, and there is, I've read about the A3 system and the other 2 systems, but from what I recall, the A3 system was derived because they wanted a system that would have cataclysmically more possible key codes. So the A3 system uses an increment between the pin that's 0.018. Still too close, but what they do is they only use because of that 0.018, they have 6 depths. That permits them to go into a single step. The A2 is a 2-step. It just basically means whatever number you're on, if it's a 2, you can't use a 3 or a 1. You can only use it from a 2, a 0, or a 4. 2 steps. A3 is a single step. There are 6 depths. Pardon me, there are 7 depths, 0 through 6. Okay? If you are looking purely at the number of possible key codes, if you have a 6-pin system, you're going to have 7 to the 6th power. 7. Let me test that. Okay, now, and if you're looking at building a key bitting array, if you've got 7 possible depths, let's take one of them out for the master. You now have 6 possible depths, whereas before we only had 4 possible depths. So 6 to the 6th power would be your possible changes. For an A3 system, for a 6-pin, that number is 46,656. That is 6 to the 6th power. If you do 6 to the 6th power, you're going to come up with that. If you're doing a 7-pin system, you've got 279,936 possible changes. That is literally 6 to the 7th power. The problem that they found was the increment was too small and was unreliable. I've taken a class from a gentleman who is a certified master everything in the world of locksmithing and runs a Big Ten university back east, northeast of the United States. He is the person at the top of the pyramid when it comes to locksmithing at the university and other things in life that are in the realm of locksmithing, especially forensics. He told me that I've heard him say that he may have seen an A3 system once in his career, so it's never used. The A4 system, however, is not uncommon, and the difference between that and the A3 is that there's both single-step systems. But what's going to happen is in an A4 system, what they do is they increased the increment from 0.018 to 0.021. So now you've got 6 steps rather than 7. If you build a key bitting array in a 6-step system, you'll have 5 possible changes. So 5 to the 6th power will give you 15,625. Or 5 to the 7th power will give you 78,125 changes. So the bottom line is, because the increments are different, which then define whether it's a single step or a 2-step system, single step is A3 or A4, 2-step is A2, you can now appreciate why the heck are there 3 different pinning kits. That's why there are. That was a long way that was a long definition of why this is an A2 system. I apologize. Hopefully that's of help to you somehow. Now, in our kit that we have here, which is a great kit, I would very much recommend that you, if you pin best, it's awfully nice to have the original equipment. This is what it looks like. It weighs, it's actually not light, if it matters. It weighs almost 8 pounds. This metal kit, these 2 hasps, you can carry this in any orientation. If you want to carry it like a briefcase, you'll be able to do that. So I'm going to move the camera down so that we can actually view this. You have your work mat. This is a fancy mouse pad. Awfully nice. Okay, you've got your mat. In the kit, you have your pins. And I'm not going to go into the combinating of a best system. You'll see on the bottom row you have A pins. A. The top and the second and third row you have B pins. The A pins are your bottom pins. They will have the points on the bottom. They are always loaded first with the point towards the bottom of the keyway. All of your B pins will be your master wafers, your master pins, your control pins, and your driver pins. Okay, because of the way that a best system works, you have 2 share lines, an operating share line and a control share line. So basically the bulk of this are all of your pins. The only difference between them, of course, is the length. When you pin an A2 or A3 or A4 system, you're going to work by a formula that's going to tell you which pins you're going to drop into each chamber. The point of this is to go over what you get in the system. So included in the kit are going to be, I'll move that camera back up. We've got your core plug, your key gauge, you've got an ejector tool, you've got a set of tweezers. We're going to go over all those pieces now. Let's move that camera back up. Okay. So in the kit, you're going to have with you, you're going to have your capping block, and that's part number 6. You're going to use this because this is what's going to permit you to elegantly be able to, once you have your pins loaded, you need a way, because the best system works on caps. And there are caps included. These are small pieces of brass that you're going to drop down into the hole, and this is your core stop. You need to have this installed depending on whether it is a 5, 6, or 7-pin cylinder. Yes, they'll do 5-pin cylinders. I've never seen one, but they will do them on special order. I guess, you know, if you've got an office building of 30 doors, sure, if you want a special order 5-pin, have at it. I would just use 6-pin only because the key blanks won't be any shorter. The availability of 5-pin will certainly not be in stock. There must be a reason for 5-pin. Maybe there was a client, you know, your Yales and your Bests, they have contracts with the militaries, the branches of the government, the post office, the Navy, that they make stuff that no one is permitted to even purchase, and it is technically a felony to possess. So there may be a client that has 5-pin that is in that arrangement. I've never seen one, and until relatively recently, I didn't even know they would make 5-pin. So you've got to have your stop. Your cap has to go in. Then you're going to use your capping tool, of which that's part number. It's a hand capping tool, and you're going to drop your cap down there, the small brass wafer, and you're going to very carefully, with like a wood or a nylon mallet, tap that down and seat that cap to the proper dimension. So you'll have your capping block. I don't like Best because they use caps. I'm lazy, as I think all, and I'm not a locksmith, but I think locksmiths would all identify themselves as lazy, and that's like, that's a badge of honor. And what that really means is I'm looking for the most efficient way to do a job, the most elegant way. Social parlance is lazy. It's not laziness. It is seeking for the most direct path that is the most elegant way. I like small format that have the spring, the brass slide cover that I can just then tap down and clean it all off at once. The downside of your caps or your spring covers is that they will suffer from a comb attack. There's a device called a comb pick that actually looks like the key of the first pin tumbler lock invented by the Egyptians 4,000 years ago. The bottom line is these caps, and this is not a reason not to use best or any small format. And what the concept of a comb pick or comb attack is that it forces all of the bottom pins, master, control, driver pins, springs, and caps or slide covers forcefully out of the top of the core. High security cylinder manufacturers will literally use threaded set screws in the top of each chamber to prevent that sort of attack. So that's what the capping block is for. You need some way of capping this. Doing it by hand, I don't see as being very feasible. I don't see it being responsible to the client because the capping block permits you to get that cap placed and placed to the proper depth. And that's what's really most important of these caps. So you get a whole mess of caps as well. I did show you, of course, the capping tool. There are actually two of them in here. This can also be used to determine if you have a good pin stack. If you took your core, meaning a good proper height, if you took your core and stuck this into the ejector hole in the bottom, if you basically measured just with your thumb how far in this goes and then check all of them, you'll kind of tell if something's off. Because you put your keys in and they don't work. It's like, oh, what's going on here? Which chamber is no good? You can test that in the bottom real quick just with the capping tool or your pin ejector tool. You're going to also get your ejector pin. This is what you're going to use to dump pins, springs, caps out from the bottom of the core. If you're going to push this all up and out, everything's coming out. Okay. Best will tell you in their catalog, don't reuse any of the stuff that you pull out. I've reused pins my entire career. That's really kind of no problem when you're dealing with your standard caliber locks that don't have incredibly high machining tolerances. And if you've got brand new stuff, yeah, reuse it. I mean, you run the risk of putting it back in the wrong place. It's a waste of time to measure them. Just throw them out. Not to advocate that, but let's face it, you've got 100 locks to core. If it's worn material, don't use it, because something that is a certain dimensional size, you put your caliper on it, I guarantee you it's no longer that size. Now your keys aren't going to work right. You're cutting new keys using worn pins. You can't expect it to actually work. That's your ejector pin. Set of tweezers, I don't use them when I pin locks, when I'm loading chambers. But if I'm trying to install bottom or driver pins back into the Bible of a cylinder, I'll certainly have to use tweezers. A lot of people only use tweezers for doing their lock work. So tweezers are included. You might be a tweezer person. Your key cut indicator, this is a key gauge. How you use that is to simply take this key and slide it in, as I'm doing here, until it stops. Hold it straight. What cut is that? I can't see it. Is that a 4 cut? Yeah, it's a 4. It's just shy of a 4, but that's a 4 cut. And that's how keys are gauged. You slide it in your gauge until it stops. You know what cut you've got on the key. Okay, etc. This is a 0 cut at the one I was just checking. So there are a couple of cut keys in there for you to do that. Very handy. If someone walks in, hey, I need some cores. Here's my control key. Here's my change key. Key me up some cores. Cut me 9 more. Make me 9 more changes, etc. Well, you're going to start with something. Maybe a master. Certainly a change key. Certainly a control key, and you'll be able to record those biddings so that you can then expand the system. Then springs are of course included. You're certainly going to want to use original springs for this. The size, everything is going to be based on the science of those springs being absolutely what is required. There is also the quick reference that is literally the underside of the lid. There's a link below this to that so that you can study it. We've talked about pretty much everything that's here. They give you an example of how to pin the stuff here. That is not really enough information for you to understand what's being done. You're going to want to read how the formula is derived. You know, where does the control B segment come from? It would be nice to know how that's derived before you get to an 8. Okay, you have to know what the control number. Well, they've got control cuts here. Oh no, forgive me, that's the change key. You'd need to know what your control key is to derive the control B segment, or the control lug, the control compensating pin. Capping instructions need to be followed, and that's where the capping block comes into play. That depth that needs to be maintained, and it's easier if you just look at the image below this video, showing you how to use the key cut indicator, how to use the combinating the core block, and then troubleshooting. You know, if you get into a situation where something doesn't work, what I do is I do it one chamber at a time. I load my pins, I put my spring in, and I hold my finger or my thumb over the top of it as a cap. I test my one key. I test all my keys in the first chamber, go to the next. You come into a problem where something doesn't work, study your pins. Are they wrong pins? You know, maybe you simply used a pin that's a 7 rather than an 8. That will cause you problems. And learn by going chamber to chamber. Then you'll be able to back up and say, why did I make that mistake, and then adjust. But it all really boils down to learning the, and it's a quick read. It's not like the Corbin Russwin cylinder manual. That is a commitment. This is lunch with a friend. The A2 and A4 keys system training. This is not a commitment that will change your life forever. So study that first to learn how the numbers are built together. It's not nearly as bad as others could be, especially high security stuff. Troubleshooting is there. So this pin kit's not really going to change whether it's an A4 system either. I doubt you'd order an A3. I was putting that back together, realizing my clasps were very easy. Then I realized I forgot my fancy mouse pad, my work mat. It's also nice to have a pinning tray as well if you're working on existing stuff where you can load those pinning trays. Best certainly does make one, and you can review that from their manufacturers, from that page in the service manual. You'll certainly find a lot of information there. If you have any questions on best pinning, I'm not an expert by any means. I've done it. I've done it for years. I understand how to do it. I don't do it often, but I do it often enough to where I want to possess the knowledge to be able to do it and explain it to others. If you have any questions on the best, this is their CD431-2 Combinating kit for their A2 system or any other best product. Please feel free to reach out to us, and thank you.